Last time we talked about the difference between defining and calling a function, and this time we talked about it conceptually. This time we'll talk about how to do it in Python. As a recap, defining a function means writing the instructions of what the computer should do, and calling a function means telling the computer to go ahead and do those right now. You can define a function and not use it. You can just have it on standby. It's sort of like writing directions to tell your friend how to get to the local basketball court from, let's say, from the library. So you've written them on paper. But again, calling would be, hey, will you please go to the basketball court now? Follow these instructions and go there. All right, so in our case, we're ready to define a function. And I gave a rather challenging function to write last time, or a couple times ago, so I want to go ahead and make a slightly more, I want to make a simpler one. I want to check whether a number is even. So again, don't worry if you haven't seen certain words here. We're going to walk through them one by one. Def. This is short for define. We are defining a function in Python using def. And what happens in this piece of code, we use the word def. We then get to create a name for our function. We then use parentheses to list anything that the function needs to take as its input in order to do its job. That would be, you can also call them parameters. Here I've listed one parameter. Python can have 0. You can have many. It's up to you. So what we should do, a best practice is to immediately create a docstring. It's called a docstring. And to say input an integer and output, and these are just notes to self. So you don't have to do them in any particular format. Output a Boolean indicating a Boolean which is, true if even, let's say. Returns true if the integer n is even. So what I'm doing right now, these are notes to self that are intended to help explain what this function does. You might say, well, this function sounds simple. And what I'd say to you is, nothing is simple for the computer. We have to really spell it out, and this is a canonical example you can use to understand functions. So the first thing that we might want to do is double check. If we're being really clever, we might want to double check that this is an integer and give some sort of error if it's not. I'm going to leave that to you. What I'll do here instead is I will do a calculation. So I'm going to call it remainder. I'm making a variable now called remainder, and that's going to be n mod 2. Don't worry if you haven't seen this before. What this symbol means, this percent sign in Python, it means take this first number, divide it by this second number, and give me the remainder. So coincidentally, I called the variable remainder to help you out. So now we're going to check. If the remainder is 0, we want to do a certain thing. Notice that I need a colon anytime I'm using an if statement. And if you're new to coding, I would encourage you to put the 0 on the left-hand side to help remind yourself that we always need a double equal sign when we're using a conditional statement. So if the remainder is 0, we're going to return true. And otherwise, we will return false. So what I've done is written a function to check whether a certain thing is even and to return true if it is and false otherwise. How did I know this? Well, even numbers have a remainder of 0 when they are divided by 2. And again, this is called the modulus operator. Let's spell that. This is the modulus operator. Okay. So go ahead and see if you can modify this. If you're new to Python, just take a second to try to explain this and maybe put some comments. And if you're more experienced with Python, please go ahead and try to make this function a little more robust so that it can not break. Try to put this inside a try-catch, this remainder thing, so that it doesn't break if they put in the wrong input. Okay, next we're going to look at how to call this. Yeah, pause the video and go do those 2 tasks. Okay, now I want to talk about how to call it. It's conventional in a Python program to put your function definitions at the top and then use them down below. So to exaggerate that, I'm going to put in a bunch of blank lines. So now if I want to actually to prove my point, I want to run this program and I want you to see that nothing happens. I'll go ahead and put a print statement down here. The program is finished. All right, this is looking like a great program so far. So I want to run, what did I call this file? Function practice. Okay, look, so I ran the function, I ran the program, and I got this code. The program is finished. It did not, this doesn't run at all. Well, which is to say, it gets, the definition is processed by Python, but we never called it. So now we need to call it in some way. So I'm gonna just say, let's actually go ahead and I'm gonna run it and print the result at the same time. So I want to know if 8 is even. Actually, I want to know if 800 is even. Actually, I feel like typing a lot of zeros, so I'm just going to type in a lot of zeros now. Okay, you gotta have fun while programming. So this is a little bit, these are two things in one step. See how inside these parentheses I'm calling the function is even? I'm calling it with 800. How come I didn't call it with the letter n? I thought I was to take the letter n. Not true. This definition uses a generic letter, but when it's being called, we better use a specific thing. And when this gets called, Python will substitute the number 8, however many I said this was, 80 bazillion such and such is, to, it will substitute that number for n. And then it should print the result. Let's find out if this program is working. Okay, look, it printed a true. It discovered that this was even. Now let's make it odd. Okay, so hopefully now we'll get a false, and we got a false. So what's happening is this is being called. Yes, it would be totally fine to make some variable and store this thing in there. I'm going to go ahead and do that now, just so we're all on the same page. I can do this, and I can print result. Very important thing is happening here. Because I used this other keyword in Python, this is a reserved word in Python, it's called return. What that means is that anytime this function is called, it will be returning a value. You can write functions that don't return values, and we'll do that. But this function is returning a value, which means I'm allowed to use this function on the right-hand side of an equal sign because it's producing a value. And I can then take that value and I can store it someplace. So as a memory jog, right-hand side of an equal sign must make some sort of value, and the left-hand side must be a place to store that value. Okay, so this is an alternative way. These two lines, lines 15 and 17, these are an alternative way we could have put that whole thing inside the print statement. So let's try running this program now. And we're still getting false because it turns out putting a 1 at the end of our number means it's not even. Okay, so go ahead and spend a second thinking about that. We'll return to this program in the next video.